From the frozen tundra of Alaska to the southern tip of South America, across deserts, rainforests, mountains, and plains, hundreds of distinct indigenous nations have lived for thousands of years. The Navajo, the Maya, the Inca, the Inuit, the Mapuche, the Lakota, the Guarani. Hundreds of different languages, hundreds of different cultures, hundreds of different ways of building, worshiping, farming, hunting, and understanding the world. If you looked at the sheer diversity of Native American peoples, you would never guess that they all share one thing in common. But they do, and it is written in their DNA. Every indigenous population in the Americas, from the Arctic Circle to Tierra del Fuego, descends from a single founding group of people, not multiple waves of settlers arriving at different times from different places. One group, one migration, one small band of human beings who crossed from Asia into the Americas roughly 15 to 20,000 years ago and gave rise to every Native American civilization that would ever exist. The story of how we know this and what it reveals about one of the greatest migrations in human history is one of the most remarkable chapters in modern genetics, and almost nobody knows it. If you find these stories fascinating, make sure you subscribe to Bloodlines and Borders. To understand the origins of Native Americans, you have to go back to the last ice age, when the world looked nothing like it does today. Sea levels were dramatically lower than they are now, roughly 120 meters lower at their lowest point, because so much of the planet's water was locked up in massive ice sheets that covered much of North America, Europe, and Northern Asia. That drop in sea level exposed land that is now underwater, and the most consequential piece of exposed land was Beringia, a vast landmass connecting what is now Siberia to what is now Alaska. This was not a narrow footbridge between continents. Beringia was enormous, at times over 1,000 kilometers wide from north to south, a land of tundra, grassland, and cold-adapted wildlife that served as a habitable bridge between the old world and the new. At some point between roughly 25,000 and 15,000 years ago, a group of people from northeastern Asia moved into Beringia. They did not do so with the intention of discovering a new continent. They were following game, seeking resources, and living the way human populations had always lived, moving gradually across a landscape that happened to connect two land masses. They almost certainly had no idea they were doing anything historically significant. They were just trying to survive. But what happened next is what makes this story extraordinary. Once in Beringia, this group became isolated. The brutal conditions of the last glacial maximum, when ice sheets reached their greatest extent and covered much of northern North America in walls of ice kilometers thick, cut them off from the populations they had left behind in Asia. To the east, massive glaciers blocked any path into the interior of the continent. To the west, the populations of Siberia were themselves under severe environmental stress. For thousands of years, possibly as many as 8,000, this small population lived in Beringia, genetically separated from the rest of humanity. Scientists call this the Beringian standstill, and it is one of the most consequential periods of isolation in all of human history. During those millennia of separation, the people living in Beringia accumulated unique genetic mutations that would distinguish them and every single one of their descendants from every other human population on Earth. The mitochondrial DNA haplogroups that define Native American ancestry, the Y chromosome lineages found from the Arctic to the Amazon, and the unique alleles that appear in no other population on any continent were forged during those long frozen centuries of isolation on a land bridge that no longer exists. And then the ice began to melt, roots opened southward. The descendants of that isolated Beringian population moved into the Americas. The genetic evidence for a single founding population is overwhelming. Researchers have identified a set of mitochondrial DNA haplogroups, A, B, C, D, and X, that are found in virtually all indigenous populations across the Americas. On the paternal side, the Y chromosome haplogroup Q is similarly ubiquitous. These lineages are found from the Inuit of Greenland to the Mapuche of Chile, from the Navajo of the American Southwest to the Yanomami of the Amazon. No other continent shows this level of genetic unity across such an enormous geographic range. Perhaps the most striking piece of evidence came from a study at the University of California, Davis, which identified a unique genetic variant called the 9-repeat allele. This variant was found in every single one of the 41 Native American populations sampled, from Alaska to the southern tip of South America, as well as in Inuit from Greenland, and in the Chukchi and Koryak peoples living on the Asian side of the Bering Strait. It was completely absent in all 54 Eurasian, African, and Oceanian populations tested. The researchers concluded that the simplest explanation was that all modern Native Americans descended from a single common founding population. But how small was that founding group? A landmark genetic study published in 2018 attempted to answer this question by analyzing DNA sequences from indigenous populations distributed from China to South America, spanning over 15,000 years. Using computer simulations based on 100 million generations, the researchers estimated that the original Native American founding population consisted of approximately 250 people. Every Native American civilization that ever existed, every pyramid, every city, every nation, from the Aztec Empire to the Inuit settlements of the Arctic, traces back to a group small enough to fit in a single village. If you find these stories fascinating, make sure you subscribe to Bloodlines and Borders. In 2013, archaeologists working at a site called Upward Sun River in central Alaska discovered the remains of an infant girl. She had lived 11,500 years ago and survived for only about 6 weeks. The local Athabascan community named her Jachiti Aning Tiidegai, Sunrise Child Girl. When researchers sequenced her full genome in 2018, the results were stunning. Sunrise Child Girl did not belong to either of the two recognized branches of Native Americans, known as Northern and Southern. Instead, she belonged to an entirely distinct population that the researchers named ancient Beringians. Further analysis revealed that the ancient Beringians were an early offshoot of the same ancestral population as all other Native Americans, but they had separated from the main group around 20,000 years ago, before the northern and southern branches diverged from each other. This discovery was transformative because it allowed researchers to reconstruct a timeline of how the Americas were settled. The ancestral population first emerged as a genetically distinct group roughly 36,000 years ago, somewhere in Northeast Asia. Around 25,000 years ago, gene flow between this group and other Asian populations ceased, probably because the Ice Age isolated them in Beringia. Around 20,000 years ago, the ancient Beringians split off. Then, between 17,000 and 14,000 years ago, the remaining population divided into the northern and southern branches, likely as groups began moving south through either a coastal route along the Pacific or an ice-free corridor through the interior of the continent. Ancient Beringians stayed in Alaska. The northern branch spread across what is now Canada and the northern United States. The southern branch moved rapidly down the continent, reaching South America in what appears to have been an astonishingly fast expansion. Archaeological and genetic evidence suggests that within just 1,000 to 2,000 years of entering the Americas south of the ice sheets, humans had reached the southern tip of South America, a distance of more than 15,000 kilometers. The speed of this expansion is one of the most remarkable feats of human migration ever documented. A key piece of evidence supporting this rapid southward movement is the Anzac child, a 12,700-year-old infant found in Montana and associated with the Clovis culture, the earliest widespread archaeological tradition in the Americas, famous for its distinctive spear points used to hunt mammoths and other megafauna. When the Anzac child's genome was sequenced, it revealed ancestry directly related to both modern northern and southern Native American populations. Even more remarkably, the same Anzac-related ancestry was detected in 10,000-year-old remains from Lagoa Santa in Brazil, more than 10,000 kilometers to the south. A founding population's genetic signature, stretching from Montana to Brazil within just a few thousand years, confirmed the extraordinary pace at which the first Americans spread across 2 continents. In all 3 branches, the ancient Beringians, the northern and the southern, trace back to the same founding population that entered Beringia tens of thousands of years before. Not everyone accepted the single origin theory without a fight. One of the most contentious episodes in the genetics of Native American origins involved a 9,000-year-old skeleton discovered in 1996 near Kennewick, Washington. Named Kennewick Man, the remains had cranial features that some physical anthropologists described as more similar to Polynesian or even European populations than to modern Native Americans. This has sparked a fierce legal and scientific battle. Local Native American tribes, including the Umatilla, Colville, and Yakima, claimed him as an ancestor under the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act and demanded repatriation. Scientists argued that the unusual skull morphology meant he might not be Native American at all, and that further study was needed. The debate raged for nearly 2 decades. Then in 2015, a team led by the geneticist Eske Willerslev sequenced Kennewick Man's DNA. The result was definitive. He was genetically closer to modern Native Americans than to any other population on Earth, specifically to the Colville and other tribes of the Pacific Northwest. His unusual physical features were simply part of the natural variation in ancient human populations, not evidence of a separate origin. Kennewick Man was repatriated to the tribes and reburied in 2017. The case illustrates a broader truth about Native American genetics. The physical diversity among ancient and modern indigenous peoples can be misleading. People who look quite different from each other were, genetically, part of the same family. The DNA tells a single, consistent story. One founding population, one migration, one origin. There is, however, one genetic puzzle that remains unsolved, and it is genuinely strange. In 2015, a study led by David Reich at Harvard found that some Amazonian indigenous populations, particularly the Surui and Caritiana of Brazil, carry a faint but statistically significant genetic signal related to indigenous Australasian populations, meaning Aboriginal Australians, Melanesians, and the Andaman Islanders of the Indian Ocean. The researchers called this signal Population Y. It was not found in any Native American population north of the Amazon. How did Australasian-related ancestry end up in the Amazon and nowhere else? Nobody knows. Some researchers have proposed that it arrived with a separate, earlier migration that predated the main founding population. Others suggest it was carried by a subgroup within the original Beringian population that somehow remained genetically distinct throughout the entire journey from Asia to South America, without mixing with other Native Americans along the way. In 2018, ancient DNA studies found the same signal in 10,000-year-old remains from Lagoa Santa in Brazil, proving that it was present in the Americas from an early date. One researcher said this Australasian ancestry seemed to have leaped over all of North America in a single bound to end up in the Amazon. It remains one of the most fascinating unsolved mysteries in human genetics. The genetic story of Native Americans is, at its core, a story about what a small group of people can become when given an empty continent in 15,000 years. 250 people walked into Beringia. Their descendants built Teotihuacan and Cahokia, Machu Picchu and Mesa Verde. They developed agriculture independently from the old world, domesticating corn, potatoes, squash, and tomatoes, crops that would eventually feed billions of people worldwide. They created writing systems, astronomical calendars, sophisticated irrigation networks, and political structures that govern millions. And all of it traces back to one small band of migrants who crossed a land bridge that no longer exists, carrying a set of genetic markers that their descendants still carry today, from the Arctic to the tip of South America. The land bridge itself vanished beneath the rising seas roughly 11,000 years ago, erasing the physical path that made the entire migration possible. But the genetic evidence of that crossing is written permanently in the DNA of over 70 million indigenous people alive today. The next time someone speaks of Native Americans as though they are many unrelated peoples with no common thread, remember this: the DNA says otherwise. Every indigenous person in the Americas carries within them the genetic legacy of a single founding population, A group so small, it could fit in a village that gave rise to one of the most diverse and creative chapters in the entire human story. That is what 250 people can do when they refuse to stop moving forward. If you find these stories fascinating, make sure you subscribe to Bloodlines and Borders. Thank you for watching. If you want to go deeper, the next video on your screen is one you will not want to miss. I will see you there.